Welcome back to Not Enough Projects. Today we're working on a 2010 Nissan Sentra with the supplemental restraint system light on. Let's get the scanner plugged in and see what we're working with. Alright, we've got our dongle plugged in. Let's get the ignition turned on. You can see we've also got the TPMS light on, but we're not worrying about that right now. Some genius figured out that if you take apart the whole entire dash and then take the lens off of the instrument cluster, you can put a piece of tape over the light and just fix the problem. I really don't understand why you would go through the effort to tear the whole dash apart just to throw a piece of tape over the light instead of just fixing it, because this is probably going to be a pretty simple fix. So now we're going to have to tear the dash apart to take the piece of tape off. Got our quick scan running. See BCM faults. That's probably the TPMS system, but everything's looking good. Alright, so it looks like we're just dealing with the airbag fault and probably a TPMS. One fault in the airbag system. Read our codes. Driver airbag module open. Alrighty. It says passed. Let's clear the code. See if it comes back. No fault codes detected. Okay, let's cycle the ignition. No fault codes detected. Alright, we'll do a couple power cycles, make sure that stays off. Obviously there is a fault somewhere, but this will let us know what type of fault we're dealing with that's in the driver airbag. Alright, so I went ahead and did a few drive cycles, and let's see if the airbag code came back. I'm betting it did, because those things don't just come on for no reason. Yep, there it is. Even though it's passed, it's some kind of intermittent fault. There may be some kind of issue. Well, obviously there's some kind of issue inside the airbag. It's also potential possibility that the plug came unplugged. Who knows? So now that we know the fault is current and it is with the airbag, we can go ahead and start removing it. Step one, always when working with airbag systems, disconnect the negative terminal of the battery and turn the headlights on or something to drain the power out of all the systems. You do not want to be messing with airbags with power to the car, or else it could explode in your face and you could have a bad day. Just a 10mm nut. Off it comes. Go ahead and turn the headlights on. Make sure it's drained. You can press the brake pedal too, or turn the ignition on, whatever you want. So removing the airbag is actually very simple. There's just two bolts holding it in. So to get at it, we got to pop these little covers off. Watch out because they fly over here. And then we have a 10mm bolt on this model. I believe some of them have a T27 security Torx with a hole cut out in the middle. Hole drilled out in the middle. That's what a security Torx is. And then inside we've just got a few connectors that we got to unplug. And the steering wheel controls are actually part of the unit. You could separate them if you wanted to, but they're actually sold as a whole piece. Now for our other side. Okay, now this whole unit should pull out. And back inside we have these connectors. So this is for the steering wheel controls. It's just got a little tab you depress. Out she comes. It's also a possibility, I guess, that our clock spring has issues, but that's kind of a less common fault, I would think. Now these airbag connectors, they have this black piece that you pry up and off it comes. You see it's kind of thin plastic, so you gotta be careful. So visually all these connections look good. Corrosion obviously would be an issue. This isn't a location that would be particularly prone to corrosion, but it's a possibility that you definitely want to check. Everything looks okay, so we're going to swap in a junkyard unit that hasn't gone off and is good, hopefully. See, it's pretty much identical. Start off by getting the airbag wiring back on. And then finally, steering wheel controls. Now, before we put everything back together for good, let's power it back up. Should be safe to do so. The bolts just hold it in place. And then we can see if our code goes away. We still need to take the dash apart and take the tape off. So we're not going to be able to tell if the light turns off, but we will be able to look at our scanner. Now it was a passed code before. See, one time So it did change, but that could just be because we disconnected the battery. So we'll go ahead, clear this. Still says one time. Let's turn the ignition on and off. Okay, so it's not actually going away, but the type did change. So maybe let's pop the dash off, take the piece of tape, and we can get a look at our light, which is going to tell us a little bit more. And I am actually noticing that this steering wheel has buttons that are labeled differently than our actual one. You can see mode, power, volume. This one must have had hands-free calling or something, because you can see that's not calling. That is just changing the mode and turning power off. So we might have to switch these side parts if this fixes the issue. Not a big deal. So to take our dash apart, we're going to disconnect the battery again, which I've already done. And it actually comes apart pretty easily. We're going to put the tilt wheel all the way down, just make it a little easier for us. So we grab onto this piece and just pull towards us. Do the same thing down here. Make sure it's free. And just kind of finagle it out. Out it comes. And now we have access to our lens, which it kind of looks like somebody's already monkeyed with. Well, we know somebody's monkeyed with it, but it's possible they actually broke some stuff. I can't exactly tell. I don't even know if we have to take that screw that holds it in all the way out. Nope. So we want to be careful not to scratch this any more than it already is. And we'll get an opportunity to clean it. Off that comes. And now we get the fun job of figuring out what kind of chemical is going to deal with the residue without ruining the panel. Let's try some WD. Alright, so I'm actually going to try using solvent. I'm worried the WD is going to stain it with the oil. And you can see somebody's actually taped over the TPMS light at some point. I guess tape's the solution to everything. Yeah, it's taking it off. Oop, nope, it's destroying it. Alright, well, that's not good. We may need to grab another cluster. Yeah, it's taking it off. Thanks, guy, whoever put tape on. Luckily, this is an easy piece to get to. Might be easiest for us to just remove the whole cluster. Yeah, let's go ahead and pop that Phillips head screw up. And actually, before we do this, let's do a little bit more diagnostics, because now we can see the light. Even though we ruined the light cover, we'll still be able to actually see the light and know what's going on. So, battery's reconnected. Okay, airbag light's blinking. Yes, we've still got a code. So let's take another look at our scanner. We may have a clock spring issue after all. Yeah, the code just immediately comes back. So there you go. Alright, so let's go ahead and take out and replace our clock spring. Once again, we're going to want to disconnect the battery before we do anything. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back to the steering wheel. So, we already have our steering wheel ready to go. So we got to unplug everything once again. So the service manual, probably for liability reasons, because airbags are obviously kind of a dangerous thing to work with. The service manual procedure for the code that we're seeing is to, one, replace the airbag module, then replace the clock spring, and finally to replace the actual supplemental restraint system computer. So hopefully the clock spring takes care of this for us. And this is a 19mm nut holding the steering wheel on. Little tip, you want to, when you're pulling steering wheels off, thread the nut on a little bit so you don't whack it into your face. Just like that. You need to take the airbag harnesses out of the loom. Here's our clock spring. But to actually get at it, we're going to need to pop the top and bottom covers off. It's all done with Phillips heads through these holes. So You just gotta work around and gently disengage all these clips. Just if you get a pry tool in there, just kind of give it a little. You just get a pry tool in there and give it a little bit of a twist. It should pop out real easy. Okay, now we can get to the screws holding the clock spring on. It's just these two Phillips heads. Then there's a clip up here you gotta push down and release. Now we can unplug these two connectors. So you've got these three connectors you can see here. This one goes up top here. These two obviously go down there. So now we'll go ahead and pull our stocks off. They just have these two clips that you push in. Out they come. Covered in some kind of nastiness. Here's our old one. And here's our replacement one. But before we actually get this in, we're going to go ahead and remove the instrument cluster the rest of the way so we can replace our ruined lens or whatever you want to call it. So it's just held in with these three Phillips heads. Definitely a lot easier to get at it when you have the whole steering wheel off, but you can do it with the steering wheel on. I'm going to go top out first. And this should come out just far enough to get the harness off. Like that. And out it comes. So it's a few different layers. Unfortunately, it's kind of a pain to get at the plastic film piece we need to get to. But we'll just go around, pop these clips for the bezel. And then to actually get at this film, we have to take off these chrome surrounds. And in order to do that, we got to actually take the whole circuit board out. This isn't generally a procedure that was envisioned. They'd probably just say replace the whole instrument cluster, but I was able to get the film at the junkyard, so as long as we don't break anything coming off, we should be good to go. And then we don't have to worry about reprogramming the miles or anything like that. Okay, there's that plastic. And then to take this board off, I believe we actually have to take the needles off. Hopefully not break them. So it's actually two pieces. It's got this chrome piece that sits on top. We may have to glue that back in because we popped it off, but we'll see. Okay, that one came off in one piece. So now we can pop the circuit board out. It's just held on with two clips. Now the screen has these header pins that plug into the circuit board, but the screen will stay with this piece. And then we also have our reset push button and dimmer. Now finally we can get at our surrounds. So it's got these plastic clips that I think you just got to push away from there and push through. Just like that. Okay. Here's our first bezel for the speedometer. Then for the tack, but they're probably identical anyways. I think it might come off now without even removing that bezel, we'll see. Nope. So this bezel needs to come off too. Now our little black film piece will come off. Hopefully. Let's see. Looks like the speedometer had this little plastic washer piece that goes in there. Then here's our new junkyard film. We want to make sure they are the same, which it looks like they are. And this one doesn't have any tape on it, so that's a big plus. Our washer back on. So here's our reassembled dash. We're going to go ahead and try cleaning it with alcohol before we put it back together. This is probably what I should have started with and I wouldn't have ruined it. But that's okay. We're just going to test it up here to make sure it's okay. Yep, it's not removing anything, so we'll give this a full wipe down just to remove any dust or anything that's going to annoy us or whoever's driving it. Okay. Now we can go ahead and fully reassemble. Get this back plate on. And then last thing, we've got this lens, which is filthy, so we're going to go ahead and clean it. And back in it goes. There we go, there's our dash back together. Now we can go ahead and get our new steering wheel clock. So, obviously we don't want to install it if it's turned too much to one side, because if you go full lock and it's not in the right position when you install it, you'll break the cable. So we got to make sure we're in the center. So we're going to go until we hit the stop right there. and then we'll count the amount of turns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a little more. So we need to go 2.5 turns, and then we should be at center. 1, 2, and a half. We should be at center now. And we'll verify that real quick. 1, 2, and a half. 1, 2, and a half, and a little bit more. I messed it up. Restart, man. So we're at one of the stops, so we'll go back up top. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a little less than 5. So we should just need to go 2.5 turns and then we'll be in the center. Okay, so verify 1, 2, 3, and a little bit more. So I think we're off center. 1, 2, 3, that's where we started. 1, yeah. Okay, so we need to shift over 1, so 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, a little bit more. 1, 2, we should be in center. 1, 2, and a little bit more. Okay, and then we'll get those screws back in. 3 of them, I should mention. 2 on this side, the other one on the passenger side. Now for the steering wheel, steering wheel, we are going to need to verify that we get it aligned properly. You can see the line on the steering column shaft. It aligns with that arrow on the actual steering wheel itself. So when we install, we want to make sure those are lined up before we push it on. Now we'll go ahead and put our steering wheel nut back on. And finally our airbag. And our controls harness. There we go. Now before I bolt this back up, I'm going to make sure we actually have fixed our problem. So let's hook the battery back up and plug in the scanner. Alright, so we've got our airbag fault. I believe that body control module fault was TPMS related, and it's a historic code. But we can check that. Okay, read codes. It's a passcode now. We'll go ahead and erase. See, it didn't come back immediately this time, but it didn't do that the first time either. And that could be related to a intermittent open in the clock spring. Turn the ignition back on. and the airbag light turned off, which you probably can't see, but it did. Before it would blink, even ignition on, engine off. Let's start the engine. Alright, let's go through a full lock-to-lock turn on the steering wheel. Okay, airbag light's still off. Let's do a cycle on the key. No codes detected. So I'm gonna go ahead and do some drive cycles, make sure all is good, but it's looking like that was probably the problem. I'll button up the airbag, just those two 10mm bolts in the covers, and we should be good to go. So we'll see, but I'm betting that was our problem. The old clock spring felt kind of loose. This new one was a little tighter, even though it was a used one, but not used as much, obviously.